Bonsuelo, everybody. All right. Fractions. Now I'm going to put a problem at the top of this. You don't need to write it down. I just want to show you something. 1/4 plus 5/6. Okay? And just listen. First of all, you need to find the common denominator. The common denominator is not 24. You don't just take 4 times 6. Okay? The common denominator is 12. Now, and again, you don't need to write this down, just listen. Let's say you can't get that just by looking at it. I'm going to show you how to get the common denominator. But I just want to say this. If you look at 4 and 6 and go, well, the common denominator is obviously 12, you don't need to go through everything that I'm going to show you. Okay? But I'm going to show you what to do when it's not so easy to find the common denominator. Okay. Well, let's finish this problem off anyway. So let's say you're looking at this and you know the common denominator is 12. Okay? Well, this is what you do then. What do you do with a 4 to make it into a 12? The denominator in this first fraction is 4. How do you get it to be a 12? Well, you multiply by 3. So what do you do with the first fraction to get it to have a common denominator of 12? You don't multiply by 3. You have to multiply by 3 over 3. Okay? If you multiply by 3, that doesn't make the denominator 12. It makes the numerator 3. And the second fraction, the denominator right now is 6. How do you get it to be a 12? Well, you multiply by 2. So how do you get this whole fraction to have a common denominator of 12? You don't multiply by 2. You multiply by 2 over 2. It's just basic fractions. Okay? So that would give us 3 plus 10 over 12, which then would end up to be 13/12. Or if you want to call it 1 1/12, I don't care. But anyway, I'm not really intending to go through that. You should already know how to do that. If you don't, you got to get that straight right away, because none of the rest of this is going to make any sense. Okay, so what I want to talk about here is how do you find the common denominator? What you have to do is factor all quantities completely and write it with exponents. So what do you have to do? Factor it completely and then write with exponents. All right. So let's take a look at the common denominator for 60 and 18. Now, this one's not as easy as like 4 and 6. So what do? You take 60 and you factor it. And over here, I factored it. And it becomes 2 squared times 3 times 5. Then you take 18 and you factor it. And it becomes 2 times 3 squared. Now, what do you do to find the lowest common denominator? Write down every number, not the exponents, but just the numbers that you see. Okay, so there's a 2, there's a 3, there's a 5. Okay, the 2 we've already got. I don't need to write it down again. And the 3 we've already got. I don't need to write it down. So now look at each one. This one over here and this one over here. And what's the largest exponent for each factor? Well, the first one has a 2 squared, and the second one has 2 to the first, so 2 squared is the largest exponent. The first one has 3 to the first, the second one has 3 squared. Okay? And the first one is the only one with a 5, so it's 5 to the first. So that is the common denominator, is 2 squared times 3 squared times 5. Now, how you finish off the rest of this problem, we'll get to in a little bit. Okay? But that's how you find the common denominator. Again, unless it's a really simple problem and you just look at it and kind of know what it is. Okay, how about the lowest common denominator, or in this case, it's called the least common multiple, but the least common multiple is the same as the lowest common denominator. For 120, x to the 7th, y to the 15th, and 162, x to the 19th, y to the 11th. Okay, so I factored the 120 first. I factored the 162. So this gives me 2 to the 3rd times 3 times 5 times x to the 7th times y to the 15th. And this gives me 2 times 3 to the 4th, x to the 19th, y to the 11th. So I write down the 2, the 3, the 5, the x, and the y. And now let's put their largest exponents on it. We have 2 to the 3rd and 2 to the 1st, so I'm going to write down 2 to the 3rd power. We have 3 and 3 to the 4th, so it's 3 to the 4th power is the largest exponent. 5, it's just 5. X to the 7th and x to the 19th is x to the 19th. It's the largest exponent for x. And y to the 15th and y to the 11th is y to the 15th. That's the largest exponent for y. So the common denominator is 3,240 x to the 19th, y to the 15th. Okay? So if these things were denominators of a fraction, this would be the common denominator. Okay? Now let's just do the same thing. So what do? Factor, because right now it's not factored. So we have x squared plus 3x minus 10. We're going to factor it into x minus 2 and x plus 5. We have x cubed plus 7x squared plus 10x. So first we're going to factor out the x, then we're going to factor it into x times x plus 5 times x plus 2. So what do we have? We have an x, fine. We have an x minus 2, fine. We have an x plus 2, fine. And then an x plus 5. And what's the largest exponent for those? Well, the x is just x to the first. X minus 2 is x minus 2 to the first. X plus 2 is x plus 2 to the first. And the y plus 5 is to the first power. You don't want to count up how many there are. Notice on the example number 2, the x to the 7th and the x to the 19th, we didn't call it x to the 26th. We just took the largest exponent. So it doesn't matter that they're 2x plus 5s. What you want to do is take the one with the largest exponent, and they both have the same exponent of 1. So if we had a fraction if we had a problem, addition problem, with the first denominator being x squared plus 3x minus 10, and the second denominator being x cubed plus 7x squared plus 10x, then this thing that I've got here, x times the quantity x minus 2 times the quantity x plus 2 times the quantity x plus 5, that would be the lowest common denominator. Okay, now, how do you add then? The thing I just finished going through is how you find the lowest common denominator. Okay, so again, let's find the lowest common denominator and just go through some more examples. So if we have 36x squared y to the 5th, that factors into 2 squared, 3 squared, x squared, y to the 5th. And if we have 24x to the 7th, y to the 4th, that factors into 2 cubed times 3 times x to the 7th, y to the 4th. So we write down the 2, we write down the 3, we write down the x, and we write down the y. Now what's the largest exponent for each of those? Well, 2 squared and 2 cubed, the largest exponent is 2 cubed. 3 squared and 3, largest exponent is 3 squared. X squared next to the 7th, the largest exponent is 7. Y to the 5th and y to the 4th, the largest exponent is 5. And again, going through the rest of the problem, I'll go through it a little bit. Okay? So that would be your lowest common denominator. Okay, this one. X plus 1 cubed times x minus 5 quantity to the 4th. And then the other one would be x plus 1 to the raised to the 5th, x minus 5 quantity squared, and x minus 7. So we write down everything we see. There's an x plus 1, an x minus 5, and an x minus 7. What's the largest exponent for x plus 1? 5. What's the largest exponent for x minus 5? 4. And then the x minus 7 is just to the first power. So if I was going to add two fractions and these were the denominators, these things right here, This whole thing is what the lowest common denominator would be. And again, I'll go through the rest of the problem in a little bit. You know, how you'd actually add fractions with these. Okay, so number 3, you take the problem that's given and you factor it, and we've factored that many times. Take the second one, factor it. And what do you see here? Okay, there's a t minus 1, and a t plus 1. So the largest thing is t to the first power. The largest of t minus 1 is a t minus 1 quantity squared. And the largest for t plus 1, there's a t plus 1 to the first and a t plus 1 to the second. The largest one is t plus 1 to the second power. So that would be your common denominator. Now, let's just take this last one and see how we actually add two fractions. Okay. We've got two fractions. They have the denominators the same that are up in number 3. Well, I'm not going to go through all the work, but you factor it, and you get this. You factor the other denominator, and you get this. Okay, so what's the common denominator? The common denominator is, as I've shown up above in example 3, t times t minus 1 times t minus 1 quantity squared times t plus 1 quantity squared. Okay, so then this is what you do. Look at this denominator. What is in the common denominator that you don't see in this denominator? Okay? So what is not here that you see in the common denominator? Well, there is a t minus 1 squared, there is a t plus 1, but what we're missing is a t and then another t plus 1, because the common denominator has a t plus 1 quantity squared. But we've only got one t plus 1. So what we have to do is multiply top and, we have to supply those into the first fraction. So we multiply top and bottom by whatever's missing from the fraction. So we have t times the quantity t plus 1, and then t times the quantity t plus 1. Okay, here, again, what you want to do, for the second fraction, what do you not see here that you see here? Okay, well, there's a t plus 1 squared, but what's missing is the t minus 1 squared. So we multiply top and bottom by t minus 1 squared, quantity squared. Okay? Then once we do that, we multiply it all out. And when you multiply it out, that's how you get this numerator. And then you simplify the numerator. Okay? Number 2, we have 5x plus 4 over x minus 7 and 3x plus 8 over 7 minus x. Now, what's the common denominator? It's not x minus 7 times 7 minus x. It's just x minus 7. So this doesn't say x minus 7 right now. So what I'm going to do is multiply top and bottom by -1. Now, this -1 goes to the bottom, making it an x minus 7. That's our common denominator. What do you do with this -1 that's on the top? You can give it to the whole fraction, the whole numerator, and call it -3x plus 8, but don't do that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying you'll start making mistakes. So instead, what I'm going to do is take it and put it to the whole fraction. And that's how this changed to become a negative. Okay, now let's just combine. We have 5x minus 3x is 2x, and 4 minus 8 is -4. So we have 2x minus 4 over x minus 7. Okay? And by the way, just so you know, you may leave denominators in factor form, because notice the denominators, like if you look at this one, the denominator gets complicated very quickly. That's a very difficult thing to multiply out. So because I'm such a nice, warm, kind-hearted kind of guy, I'm saying it is okay to leave denominators factored as long as you multiply out the numerators. Technically, you should always multiply out everything because that's what it means to simplify is combine. But for the sake of time, it's okay if you leave the denominators in factored form. Okay, now we'll go through more examples in the next one, but that's just kind of the basic idea. Obviously, what I spent most of my time talking about here was how to find the common denominator. If you don't understand how to find the common denominator, which is just the same as the least common multiple, don't go on, because you need to find the common denominator in order to do these problems. Okay? So get that straightened out first, and then go to the next file. Bonsuelo, everybody.